Every few minutes, somewhere in this country, another senior sits across from a doctor and hears the word dementia. By the time this video ends, more families will have heard it too. And after more than 20 years working the bedside with older adults, I need to tell you something that almost nobody says out loud in this space. Not every one of those stories is really about getting old. Some of them start somewhere much smaller. A bottle sitting on the bathroom shelf that somebody, at some point, promised was completely safe. No warning label, no conversation. Just a pill taken quietly, night after night, year after year, while the person taking it slowly stopped being entirely themselves. I've stood at the foot of a bed and watched a daughter try to accept that her mother didn't recognize her anymore. And more than once in my career, that story had a different ending than anyone expected. Because what looked like the slow, permanent slide of dementia turned out to be something else entirely. Something sitting quietly in a pill organizer on the kitchen counter. Number 2 is the one I specifically want you to pay attention to, because it's prescribed to millions of people for something that sounds completely ordinary, everyday anxiety or a low mood that just won't lift, the kind of thing almost every family deals with at some point. Most medications in this broader family are considered fairly gentle compared to older psychiatric drugs, and for most people, that reputation is well earned. They've genuinely given people their lives back. But there is one particular member of that family that carries a noticeably stronger effect on that same memory chemical than its relatives do, something that doesn't always get explained clearly at the first appointment when someone is simply relieved to finally have something that helps. I've personally watched patients on this specific medication show real, measurable declines in short-term memory and word recall within roughly their first year on it, changes subtle enough that they were often mistaken for just being tired or stressed or distracted. There's a painful irony sitting inside that observation. A medication meant to protect someone's stability and mood may, over time, be quietly wearing down the very clarity it was supposed to protect. If you know you're on this particular one, it is absolutely worth a direct conversation with your doctor about whether a different medication in the same family might be a better long-term fit for your memory specifically. I'm Sarah. Especially if the mood benefit has been steady, but you've quietly started noticing you're the one struggling to find words at the dinner table now. And now, number 1. I want to be honest with you. This last one isn't a single medication at all, and in some ways it might be the most important thing in this entire video. Number 1 is what happens when several of these medications stack up in the same person at the same time. And nobody ever sits down and adds up the total weight all of them are putting on the brain together. I have seen this exact scenario more times than I can count. Someone taking an antihistamine every night for sleep, a bladder medication every morning, a nerve pain medication in the evening. Individually, a doctor might look at each one and see nothing alarming. But together, the effects don't just add up, they compound, and the total burden on that memory chemical rises fast. I'm 45 years old, and I've spent more than 20 years caring for older adults. Most of that time on a geriatric care ward, along with years doing home health visits for seniors living on their own. When it gets blocked from several directions at once, the brain doesn't simply slow down a little. It can settle into a quiet, underpowered state that looks remarkably like Alzheimer's disease on a cognitive test, when the real driver underneath is chemical, not degenerative. The hardest part of my job, in moments like that, is watching a family grieve someone who is still sitting right there in the room with them, physically present but somehow fading behind their own eyes, while the actual cause sits quietly in a weekly pill organizer nobody has ever really added up. And here's the part of this video I actually care most about sharing with you. The reason I sat down to make it at all. This kind of decline is very often reversible when it's caught early enough. Reduce that combined burden, carefully and under a doctor's supervision, and I have watched people regain real clarity within weeks or months, not years. The brain is more resilient than most people give it credit for, but only once the source of the harm has actually been identified and addressed, which is exactly why a real medication review, not a rushed 5-minute glance at a list, matters so much. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Robert, going into houses and apartments where nobody else was watching closely enough to notice the small changes. He was 78 years old, a retired high school history teacher who lived just outside Columbus, Ohio, sharp as a tack for most of his life, the kind of man who still did the crossword every single morning with his coffee. Over about 2 years, his family watched him fade in slow motion. He'd forget his grandchildren's names mid-sentence, and have to stop and start over. He got lost driving a route he'd driven for 30 years, ending up 2 towns over with no memory of how he got there. Bit by bit, the family started grieving a man who was still physically sitting right in front of them. Everyone, including Robert himself in his more lucid moments, had quietly accepted that this was dementia and that there was nothing left to do but watch it progress. His daughter, who I'll call Susan, told me she'd already started looking into memory care facilities. She'd made peace, or tried to, with the idea that her father was simply gone in the ways that mattered most, even while his body was still healthy and strong. That's how far this had gone before anyone stopped to really look at what was in his medicine cabinet. I've sat at more bedsides than I can count and watched the same story unfold over and over again. It was only when a new doctor sat down and reviewed every single thing Robert was taking, not just his prescriptions, but the sleep aid from the drugstore, the bladder medication, the nerve pain pills he'd been on for a bad back for years, that the picture started to shift. Under careful medical supervision, several of those medications were tapered and adjusted, one at a time, slowly, with real monitoring along the way, because rushing this kind of change can be just as risky as never checking at all. Within about 6 weeks, Robert's daughter called me and said the words I still think about, the words that are honestly a big part of why I keep making these videos. I got my father back. He remembered his grandchildren's names again, all 4 of them, without hesitating. He asked about their school projects, wanted details, wanted to hear more. He picked the crossword back up on a Tuesday morning, and by Susan's account, he finished the whole thing. Pause on that for a moment, because I think it deserves one. I want to be honest with you, because that's what I promised myself when I started making these videos. Not every case ends this way, and this kind of decline isn't always reversible, no matter how carefully a medication list gets reviewed. Someone who was sharp their entire life starts losing the thread. Sometimes what's underneath really is dementia, and no amount of adjusting prescriptions will change that. But I have seen enough patients like Robert over the years, enough Susans sitting in hallway chairs waiting for answers, to know that this possibility deserves to be checked thoroughly by someone qualified before anyone quietly accepts memory loss as simply the unavoidable price of getting older. So here is exactly what I want you to do this week, not someday, this week. Gather every single thing you or the senior in your life is taking, every prescription bottle, every over-the-counter pill, every supplement, even the ones that feel too minor to mention, and put them all in a bag. Bring that whole bag to your doctor or your pharmacist and ask them directly to review the combined effect all of it might be having on memory and thinking, not just each medication one at a time in isolation. Read the labels closely on anything marked PM, nighttime, or sleep aid, because those are very often stronger and more far-reaching than people assume. If you've noticed any new fog, forgetfulness, or confusion that started after beginning a new medication, say that specific detail out loud at your next visit. Don't let it get quietly filed away under just getting older until someone has actually taken a close look. Write it down beforehand if you have to, the timeline, the specific changes, when they started, because appointments move fast, and it's easy to forget the very details that matter most once you're sitting in that chair. Names slip. Bring a family member with you if you can, someone who's noticed the changes from the outside, because sometimes the person living through the fog is the last one to see it clearly themselves. I need to be really clear with you about something, because it matters more than almost anything else in this video. I'm a nurse, not your doctor, and I will never tell you in a video to start, stop, or switch a specific medication. Every medication I've talked about today serves an important, legitimate purpose for someone, and stopping something abruptly on your own can be genuinely dangerous, sometimes even life-threatening. Any change to what you or your loved one is taking needs to happen in partnership with your doctor or pharmacist, never on your own and never based solely on a video, including this one. I share what I've seen at the bedside because I think you deserve to know it exists as a possibility, not because I want you to walk away and start changing things tonight. The next step is always a conversation with someone qualified to look at your full picture, not a decision made alone in your kitchen. So tell me honestly, which of these 7 have you spotted in your own medicine cabinet or in your parents'? And will you commit right here in the comments to asking for a full medication review sometime this week? I mean that genuinely, not as a throwaway line to end the video on. Appointments get missed. Type it out if you need to. Make it real. I will ask this week. Your comment might be exactly what pushes the next person reading it to finally make that appointment. the one they've been putting off for months because everything else in life felt more urgent. And before you go, I want to leave you with one more thing, because I don't like ending these videos on a note of fear without also leaving you with something practical to hold on to. Your medicine cabinet isn't the only place your body has been quietly hiding its warnings. Your fingernails, of all things, can reveal signs of trouble with your kidneys, your blood, even your nervous system, years before any other symptom ever shows up anywhere else. Most people never learn what to actually look for because nobody ever taught them, and it's such a small, easy thing to check once you know what you're looking at. That's exactly what I'm covering in the next video, the specific nail signs worth checking tonight, on yourself and on the people you love. I'm Sarah, and after 20 years of doing this work, I still believe that the more you know about your own body, the better equipped you are to catch these things early, while there's still something to be done about them. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. A drive they've made 1,000 times suddenly feels unfamiliar, and they end up pulled over on the shoulder of a road they've known for decades, unsure which direction is home. And everyone around them, including the person themselves, just nods and says, well, that's what happens when you get older. Sometimes it is. Aging is real, and I'm not here to tell you otherwise. But sometimes it isn't age at all, and that difference matters more than almost anything else I've learned in this career. Before I go any further, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments how old you are and what medications you take every single day, prescription and over-the-counter both. I read every comment myself, and it genuinely shapes what I talk about in future videos, because I'd rather answer the questions you actually have than the ones I assume you have. Today, I'm walking you through 7 medications and medication patterns that I have personally watched chip away at memory in patients I've cared for. Not from a textbook, not from a journal article I read secondhand. From the bedside with my own eyes over and over again across 2 decades of doing this work. Let's start at number 7, and don't let the low spot on this list fool you, because this one is sitting in almost every medicine cabinet in America right now, including maybe yours. Number 7 is over-the-counter antihistamines, the little pills people reach for to fall asleep, calm an allergy, or take the edge off a cold. It costs a few dollars. It sits on an open shelf with no prescription required, and because of that, almost everyone assumes it has to be gentle. In my experience, it very often isn't. Think of your brain's memory system like a filing cabinet that needs a certain chemical messenger to open the drawer and file something new away. These medications block that exact messenger. And as we get older, the brain already has less of that chemical to spare, so a drug that blocks it lands far heavier on a 70-year-old brain than it ever would on a 30-year-old one. I once cared for a woman in her late 70s who had taken a nightly antihistamine for sleep for over a decade. Her daughter brought her in convinced her mother was slipping into early dementia. She couldn't hold a conversation for more than a few minutes, kept losing her train of thought, kept asking the same question 3 times in an hour. Nobody had ever connected the fog to the little pink pill by her bed because it was just an allergy medicine. Her daughter sat next to her, holding her hand, quietly furious with herself for not catching it sooner, even though there was truly no way she could have known. If this sounds like you or someone you love, start by reading the label on anything you take to sleep or anything marked PM, nighttime, or allergy relief, because those are very often the exact same drug wearing a different name on the box, dressed up as a sleep aid or a pain reliever. I've lost count of how many patients were shocked to learn that 3 different products in their medicine cabinet were, underneath the branding, essentially the same active ingredient, taken 3 times over without anyone realizing it. I'm not telling you to stop anything. Please don't do that on your own, even something over the counter. Bring the bottle, or better yet, the whole cabinet, to your doctor or pharmacist and ask them directly whether it's still the right choice for you long-term, or whether a newer option might be gentler on your memory while still doing the job you need it to do. Number 6 is a class of medication that your stomach loves and your brain quietly pays for. These are the medications prescribed for heartburn and acid reflux, the ones that shut acid production down almost completely. People stay on them for years, sometimes decades, because the moment they stop, the burning comes roaring back, so it feels like the medication is the only thing holding the line. Here's the part almost nobody hears about at the pharmacy counter. Your stomach needs acid to pull certain nutrients out of your food, and one of the most important is vitamin B12, which protects the wiring of your nerves and your brain. Turn that acid down far enough for long enough, and B12 quietly drops, along with magnesium, a mineral your brain cells depend on to fire cleanly. I've admitted patients who looked, on paper, like they were in the early stages of Alzheimer's. Confused, forgetful, struggling to follow a conversation, when the actual driver underneath was a nutrient deficiency that had been building silently for years, because nobody ever rechecked their blood work after that first prescription was written. One man I cared for had been managing his reflux this way since his 50s, and by the time anyone thought to check his labs in his late 70s, his B12 was so low his hands had started tingling, and his short-term memory had quietly slipped right alongside it. Once his levels were corrected under his doctor's care, a genuine amount of that sharpness came back within a few months, though not everything, and that's part of why catching this early matters so much. If you've been on one of these medications every single day for a long stretch, that's worth a real conversation with your doctor about whether you still need the full dose, whether a lower dose could control your symptoms just as well, or whether it's time to check your B12 and magnesium levels directly rather than waiting for symptoms to show up first. Number 5 is prescribed for a problem most people would rather not talk about out loud at all: an overactive bladder, that sudden, urgent need to find a bathroom that can reshape an entire day around it. The relief these medications provide is real, and so is the embarrassment and isolation they spare people from. But this particular class of drug blocks that same memory chemical I mentioned earlier, and it crosses into the brain especially easily, settling right in the part where new memories get formed. I once cared for a woman I'll call Dorothy, 74 years old, a retired seamstress who lived alone outside Phoenix, Arizona, fiercely independent, the kind of woman who still drove herself to church every Sunday and refused any help with her groceries. Her family was convinced she was losing it. She was forgetting appointments, losing her keys multiple times a day, dropping the thread of simple conversations mid-sentence, sometimes stopping entirely and staring at nothing while she tried to find her way back to what she'd been saying. Everyone quietly assumed it was early dementia, and Dorothy herself had started to believe it too, which was maybe the hardest part to watch. Nobody had traced it back to a bladder medication she'd been taking faithfully for nearly 4 years, filled at the same pharmacy every month without a second thought from anyone, including me the first time I met her. Pause on that for a second, because I think about Dorothy often. If any part of that sounds familiar, please take it seriously. You do not have to choose between your bladder and your brain. There are newer options that work through a completely different pathway in the body and don't carry the same risk to memory. And it's absolutely worth raising that specifically at your next appointment. Number 4 is the sedative medications people are given for anxiety or for sleep, the ones that work by turning up the brain's natural calming signal until the noise quiets down. At first, they can feel like an absolute rescue. The panic eases, the racing thoughts slow. Sleep finally comes after months of lying awake. But I've watched the picture shift over months and years of steady use. Learning gets slower. Mental flexibility fades. I've had more than one patient describe a kind of emotional flatness to me, like they're moving through fog and don't quite feel like themselves underneath it anymore, like a part of their personality got quietly turned down along with the anxiety. Families notice it too, even when they can't quite name what's changed. A parent who used to laugh easily seems muted, a step behind, present but somehow not fully there. Here is the part that matters most, and I say this as seriously as I can. If you've been taking one of these for more than a few weeks, please do not ever stop it suddenly on your own, because that can be genuinely dangerous, even life-threatening. This is a conversation to have with your doctor about tapering slowly, over weeks or sometimes months, with their guidance every step of the way. There are gentler options for anxiety, and there are specific forms of talk therapy built for exactly this kind of long-term sleep struggle that can restore calm without the same cost to your thinking. Number 3 is an older medication that gets prescribed for 3 completely different problems at once: nerve pain, sleep trouble, even migraine prevention, which is part of exactly why it became so widespread over the decades. It looks like a medicine that can do everything, so doctors reach for it often, and it genuinely does help a great many people manage real, chronic discomfort that would otherwise take over their lives. I want to be fair about that before I say anything else. But underneath that versatility, it's one of the strongest blockers of that same memory chemical still in common use today, and the effect tends to build slowly and quietly, rather than announcing itself all at once. I've watched patients on a small nightly dose for years at a time, slowly lose words mid-sentence, lose their ability to concentrate through a full television show without drifting, and simply assume it was just part of getting older, because the dose never changed and nobody ever sat them down to explain what a small dose, taken faithfully for years, could still quietly do underneath the surface. One woman I cared for had been taking a small dose of this exact medication every night for nearly 15 years for chronic nerve pain in her feet. 15 years of the same small dose, never questioned, never revisited, while she quietly became someone who read the same page of her book 3 times without remembering any of it. If you or someone you love has been on this kind of medication long-term for pain, sleep, or migraines, it's worth asking your doctor whether a different option might carry less of that particular burden on memory, especially if you've noticed any new fog since starting it, even if the dose itself has never changed.